Yesterday I had a parts delivery and the core plugs came in for the cylinder head on this 2.5 here. So what we're going to do today is go through again how to set this timing up, because when we left the video off before, I put the skew gear in, which is this thing here, incorrect. I worked out how to do it in the end, but what I'd worked out was that you have to have the cylinder head on to do it properly, because the timing's all sort of not messed up, but it's bizarre, it's bonkers, it doesn't make any sense. So this video we're going to try and make sense of it, and I'll explain to you why. Now, as you can see on the sort of temporary bench here, I've got the head. I've already fitted the thermostat and the thermostat housing. That's pretty easy. It's just a gasket, the adapter, the thermostat, gasket, cover. Easy. Now the thing is, this is for a Defender engine. On a series it's a little bit different, but we'll come to that later. The main thing is, we're going to set the engine up to top dead centre, again with a dial gauge, but we're going to take the head to the bench. We're going to have a look at it, and I've already got the valves in, so I jumped to too much there. So I'm going to take a couple of valves out and just show you basically how it goes together. Just for the record, really. And then we'll pop the core plugs in and we'll pop the head on. Right, here we are on the bench. I always like to put a little bit of foam between the metal bench and the head, just to prevent a bit of scratching. Now I've taken out the valve springs and the collets on two valves to show you, because it's a waste of time doing them all because they're exactly the same. But what we're going to do first of all is put, I was looking for my stuff here, we put these core plugs in. Now normally you don't take these out, but because this was rusty and it's all nice and clean inside, I took them out and blasted the bejesus out of it to get all the rust out. I think this engine's just been stood a long time. So I'm going to put a little bit of thread retainer on, not thread retainer, sleeve retainer, and then we're going to get a suitable socket and just bang them down. Just bang them down so they're just under flush, if you see what I mean. There we go. Same with this one. Now you don't need a real special tool to this, just bang them in with a socket, it doesn't really matter. Can you see there? It's hard to film and do it at the same time, because I tend to cover over things, but that's all we need. So I'm going to put all the rest in. There we are. They're all in, all nice and cleaned up. Like I say, I use a little bit of sleeve retainer on those. The good old boys used to use paint. I was told that once by an engine builder. They used to just use a bit of paint, and the paint used to harden around them and made a nice tight seal. I'm not sure about that. Anyway, now it comes to the valves. It should be noted that there are two different size valves. Two different size valve stems, should we say, in these engines. The intake here and the exhaust are a different size. The intake, wait a minute, this one here. The intake has got a little metal spring clip round it, whereas the exhaust has bugger all. Can you see that? So all I do, and some people say don't do this. I don't know, I have always done it for years. I've never come to any harm. Put a little bit of oil on the guide on the stems first. Now I was chatting to an engine rebuilder and said, oh no, you put them in dry, put them in dry. And I thought, well, maybe that doesn't make any sense, but maybe it does, because there's no sort of lubrication gets to these guides even when it's running. because they're into cast iron valve guides inside, so maybe they had a point, but their point was probably wrong. Anyway, I'll do it my way like Frank Sinatra. So we're going to turn the head over. Now the seats of the valves have already been ground, you know, put the lapping stick in, so that's alright, and they've cut the seats in the head, which I didn't ask to be done. Pop them in, like this. This head, somebody asked me, am I going to port it? Well, you know, looking at it, there's nothing really to port on it. It's really good. Maybe I'll get my little flashlight out and I'll show you. So there you go. That's the exhaust. Maybe you can see there isn't that much. I don't know how the hell they're going to port that out to make it any better. And we look at the inlet. I mean, the only thing you can do with the inlet is cut down the valve guide, which is sort of detrimental to the job. You don't want to do that. But you can see how open these are. Now the old ones, and like if you look on the TDI, there's castings everywhere. But there has to be a support casting for the guide. I don't know, but as you can see, there seems to be very little point in actually getting the grinder out for that. So let's put the springs in. I must have bought this when I was about 17, decades ago. Yeah, it seems a long time ago. A nice, what was it, Varney from Sheffield spring compressor. Oh man, it's paid for itself a million times over, I would have thought, and that's an exaggeration. Good little tool. So all we do, we're going to compress the spring by putting this in the cap here, and then it gives us room to put the collets in. The springs are checked with the height. I checked the height of the spring, and they were lovely. They were within spec. In fact, they were over spec, if anything. They're a double coiled spring. I think one coil goes to the left and one coil goes to the right. But these actually do turn a little bit. But anyway, that doesn't really matter. So I'll clamp this up and I'll turn it round and I'll show you what it does. No, first of all, I'll take it off. I'll put the seal on, and then I'll clamp it up. See, make sure it goes over the guide, like that. See, on the guide. There's the seals, intake, exhaust. Can't go wrong, can you? Well, I did. I nearly forgot to fit them. Spring compressor. Pull it down. Now the collets, you know, over in North America land they call these keepers, but the collets have got 3 raised segments in them. Make sure that these go flush, and you'll see this in a minute. They go right to the sort of top, if you see what I mean. If you put them too low, they won't go in. They can only go in round the guide. Yeah, wait a minute. Let's do a zoom nation. I'll turn that around a bit. There we go. Whoa. Yeah, you see there's three grooves in the top of the valve. That's where they go. They don't go anywhere else, and you can't put them in really wrong. Well, you can. I've seen them being put in wrong. But if not, they'll jam in, like Bob Marley, because he likes his donuts with jam in. There you go. That's that one done. This one. Let's get it in there. And again, collet on. Collet on. I like to hold them with my fingers just in case they ping off. And that's it. Now, just to do a little bit of a belt and braces. Just give them a tap down, because they're on a tapered fitting inside, and that'll just helps them get there. So I think that's as far as we can go for the head. Now I'm thinking about this, what order to do this in. I'm going to put the head on now. But first of all, we're going to go to look at the block because I've got a special tool to show you. Now, I've set the block up at top dead centre here, and now I'm going to fit the head. To fit the head on this particular setup here I have for my engine stand, it's all cockeyed. And there's no dowels on these heads. There are on the 200 TDI and 300 TDI. So what's to return the gasket? Nothing. There's nothing to return the gasket at all. So what I made years ago, I got 2 old head bolts. Well, you can use anything really. 1/2 inch UNF, put a screwdriver slot in the top just so you can get them out. And I use these as guide bolts, which I will put in at the front. Here and here. Alright, so that's going to go into there. I'll do that while I'm talking to you. The head gasket. Now, this is a composite head gasket. The old ones used to be copper with a piece of nice tasty asbestos between them. Good old asbestos, you can't beat it, can you? So, which way around does it go? Because this has got no marks on it. This was made in India, but there's no markings on it at all. As again, sorry, it's a composite gasket, this one. It's like a softer gasket material, and then there's a metal insert that's folded over, and inside there's a little metal shim as well, so it's supposed to be better. I don't know. There's not much compression with these engines because it's only 9-to-1 compression. I'll tell you about that when we get the head on. So which way does it go around? Notice that there is a wrong side. Notice here there is a square corner and an angled corner. The angled corner goes at the back and this piece goes at the front. I've already set the DTI up to find top dead centre, so we can now safely take that off and then slip this over the pins, if they will, like that, and now we'll go and get the head. Fitting the head is not for the faint-hearted because these are heavy, you know, but the guide bolts make it a little bit easier, I suppose. Let's get ready. Let's get ready to rumble. Don't trap your fingers. And it'll have to come around this side. There we go. There we go. Heavy, eh? So, we've got our guide bolts in there. Next we're going to put the head bolts in. And then we're going to put the push rods in. Why is that? Well, on the rocker box, on the rocker pedestal, it contains the bolts to hold the head down as well as holds the rocker in. It's a good idea, but a bad idea at the same time because you have to disturb the head bolts to get the rocker shaft off. So let me put some bolts in here just to hold it in place, and I can take these guide bolts out here and then we should be able to get on. I've got the row of bolts near the manifold on. Now I'll just take these guide bolts out. You don't need any gasket material on the cylinder head gasket. Nothing. Just put it in there. That's why I put a screwdriver slot on. Sometimes the catch on the side of the gasket a bit. There we go. And now we'll put these 2 shorter bolts in. Now I always put a little dab of oil on the threads. I don't know why, I've always have done so. Just spin them down, start the first thread, spin them down with your gun because otherwise you'll be tinkering around. You can get a speed brace to do that. The next thing, we're going to put the push rods in. These are the push rods. They're all in order, they've all been checked, they're all nice and flat. As you can see, I use the gasket box and put a point on, so that's the front. Now this is important too. We get a bit of our sticky substance, put it down the hole just to give them a fighting chance to get some lube on the top. We've already lubed them up once, but nah, doesn't do any harm, does it? So we'll take them out. Like I said, they've already been cleaned. Number one, put it in, and this is the important bit. You've got to feel, move it. I can't show you this, but what you're going to do, you've got a cup on the brass socket. What you're trying to do is get that inside that socket. You can feel it, because when you're pushing it around you can feel it. You don't want it trapped on the edge. Now we can fit the rocker shaft. Now I was digging around my drawers, as you do, and I came across the old tool I used to do for taking these off. Now I haven't done one of these engines must be for, oh, I don't know, 15 odd years. But I kept this tool. Now the reason I have this little setup here, it's just a piece of flat bar with the tube welded on either end. There isn't one in the middle because it doesn't need it. But it's to keep this assembly pulled together, because there's no circlips on the end and no pinch bolt, because this is the pinch bolt here. So you're kind of stuck really. Now we already took this apart earlier on in another video. So now what we're going to do is plonk it on. But we're going to make sure underneath here, you see there's some dowels there in the middle and in the end. We've got to make sure that those are going to go in and going to go in square. Right, so this is the tricky bit. Well, after what seems to be a lifetime of putting this shaft on, they all went in. I had to back off all the bolts and just tweak them round with a little pry bar just to get them into place. And then they went in all right. Now the next thing we've got to do is fit this little splash plate using the retaining pin that goes in here. Now that should locate the count, that locates the rocker shaft. And we've got to put that bolt back in there. That's here. There's a strange mix of bolts. There's metric stuff and there's inches, all sorts of stuff on here. Anyway, we'll put that plate in. And this is really to stop oil splashing out through the filler or the breather, because they move the things around a bit on these series trucks. There we go. Now we can fasten those bolts down here. So let's have a look and see what it looks like. There, you can see that plate on there. That's the one I've just fastened down, that little nut bolt there. And then we can fasten all the bolts down, and then we can, oops, there's Daisy, sorry about that. Me again. We'll get the book out and find the torques. We'll torque the head down as well as the rocker shaft at the same time, so everything's even Stevens. This has a torque pattern. You start from the middle and work out, just like the old 300 TDIs, 200 TDIs, in fact just about every engine. But we don't have to torque them down 2 or 3 times. It's one shot and it's done, so that's good. Steel block, steel bolts, no problem with warping or anything like that. You can just scrub that piece I've just talked about with this steel plate, because you've got to put the head bolts in first, because you can't get a socket onto this bolt. What a crazy world, isn't it? So this bit of book goes on last. Let's get the book out and get some torques worked out. I think on these old engines you just had to sort of judge what the torques were. They weren't really too sort of mission critical. And we're going to do them in foot-pounds, because here it's measured in kgfm. It's usually on torque wrenches in metric, it's Newton meters. I'm not really 100% if that works out at Newton meters or not. Anyway, No, it can't do. Because the cylinder head bolts they're saying is 65 foot-pounds, on a diesel it's 100. And the 5/16 UNF bolts are £18. So the little ones that went through the rocker shaft, they're 18 and the rest are 65. 65 works out at 8.9 kilograms foot force per metre. We'll stick with foot-pounds, but interestingly enough, this little section here is just the torques for this engine, so there isn't all that much to remember, is there? Let me get my torque wrench out, let's set it up. Gets even more interesting. It says here, this is the Haynes book of knowledge. It says here, make sure the rocker arms are correctly seated in the push rods, we've done that, and tighten the securing bolts evenly to the torque wrench settings given the specifications. There's no pattern, but generally speaking, you work in the middle and you work your way out to the edges. Again, we don't have to do them 2 or 3 times, we don't have to do anything like that. And interestingly enough, when I was saying earlier about oiling the valve guides, indeed they say lay the cylinder head on its side, lubricate the valve stems and insert them into the guides where they were removed from. So if it's good enough for Land Rover, it's good enough for me. Torque wrench set. I'm going to start in the middle. $65, that's all she's getting. Right, that's them done. Just check them. Make sure they're all snugged down, you haven't missed one. Yeah, sounds good. There. Now we can do the smaller bolts, the 5/16 ones, to I lost my page now. 18. Anyhow, I have to get my 3/4 inch one, my 3/8 drive out for that one. Here we go. I think I'll put this little plate on first. And I can get at it better. Again, there's no torque for that, you hammer it in, I suppose. And again, we'll just do these even. Oh, it's not much, is it? 18. Wait a minute, maybe an extension on that. It's surprising when you sort of reef bolts up by hand and you think you're actually tighter than the actual torque, but you don't think they are, if you see what I mean. It's very difficult to explain. Right, that is the head-on. I think we might just finish this section here so it doesn't drag on too long, and then we'll come back and do the valve, set the valves and set the timing. Now, a couple of things you'll probably notice from this engine. This was an electric fuel pump in the tank on these 2.25s out of the Defender, but I managed to work a piece on here which is the pump off it's a diesel pump from a turbo diesel, and the aluminium bracket, and it bolts on exactly the same. I didn't really do much. I cleaned it up in the vapor blaster. It came up really nice. But at least we've got a lift pump on there. You know, it's useful. But we haven't got an electric pump on this, and I don't know if this is going to go into a series or not. So I did that, and I also cleaned up the plate and put the cover on. Nothing to know there. So the next step is to do the valves, and then we'll do the timing. All right. So we'll see you later.